Regional economic communities like ECOWAS in West Africa, SADC in Southern Africa, and EAC in East Africa were meant to be building blocks. First, integrate regionally, then connect the regions, finally create one African market. Progress was slow. Regional communities competed with each other. Member states belonged to multiple communities with overlapping mandates. Protectionism remained strong. Leaders wanted to protect local industries, but there were victories. The African Union launched the African Peer Review Mechanism, APRM, where countries voluntarily submitted to reviews of their governance, encouraging accountability. NEPAD, Thabo Mbeki's economic initiative, became integrated into AU structures, coordinating infrastructure projects across borders. Plans for the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, began taking shape, a project that wouldn't be realized until 2019, but had its roots in these early AU years. One area where the AU tried to distinguish itself from the OAU was governance. The Constitutive Act included a groundbreaking provision: unconstitutional changes of government would not be tolerated. If a military coup overthrew a democratically elected leader, the AU would suspend that country. This was revolutionary. The OAU had accepted coups as a fact of African politics. The AU declared them unacceptable. Between 2002 and 2010, the AU suspended multiple countries: Central African Republic after a coup in 2003, Mauritania after a coup in 2005 and again in 2008, Guinea after a coup in 2008, Madagascar after an unconstitutional power transition in 2009. Suspension meant exclusion from AU meetings and potential sanctions. Sometimes it worked. Pressure forced restoration of constitutional order. Sometimes it didn't. Suspended countries simply waited out the AU, but the message was clear. The AU was trying to promote democratic norms, yet contradictions remained. Countries with authoritarian leaders, Gaddafi's Libya, Mugabe's Zimbabwe, Mubarak's Egypt, were full AU members in good standing because they hadn't come to power through coups. The AU could punish unconstitutional changes, but it struggled to address ongoing repression. Critics accused the AU of selective enforcement, quick to condemn coups but slow to challenge entrenched dictators. Here's what almost no one talks about: who paid for the African Union? The answer is uncomfortable. Mostly non-Africans. In 2002, the AU's budget was approximately $43 million. By 2015, it had grown to about $417 million. But here's the shocking part. Roughly 70% of the AU's budget came from foreign donors. The European Union, the United States, China, Gaddafi's Libya contributed significantly, but most African nations paid minimal dues. Some didn't pay at all. This created a fundamental contradiction. An organization meant to assert African independence was financially dependent on foreign powers, and whoever pays the bills has the influence. European donors, for example, funded peacekeeping operations but attached conditions, reports, audits, alignment with European priorities. The AU couldn't plan long-term because funding was unpredictable and came with strings. In response, the AU eventually implemented the Kaberuka Initiative, named after Donald Kaberuka, which proposed a 0.2% levy on imports to fund the AU independently. By 2016, this was generating significant revenue, but for the first crucial decade, the AU was financially compromised. This is rarely discussed, but it explains why the AU sometimes seemed to echo Western priorities rather than African ones. Muammar Gaddafi was the AU's biggest champion and its biggest problem. Between 2002 and 2011, Gaddafi used AU summits as his personal stage. He arrived with elaborate motorcades, stayed in luxury tents, and delivered rambling speeches about African unity. He pushed constantly for his United States of Africa vision, one government, one army, him as a central figure. Other African leaders found him exhausting. His grandstanding disrupted proceedings. His interference in other countries' affairs created diplomatic nightmares, but his money kept flowing, funding AU projects, bailing out struggling nations, building infrastructure. In 2009, Gaddafi was elected as chairperson of the AU, a largely ceremonial rotating position. He used it to push his agenda harder, proposing a continental government with himself as its leader. Most African leaders resisted. They had learned from history. Giving one person too much power was dangerous. Then came 2011. The Arab Spring reached Libya. Rebels challenged Gaddafi's rule. NATO intervened, bombing Libyan government forces. The AU issued statements calling for dialogue, but NATO ignored them. The AU watched as one of its member states was attacked by foreign powers, and it could do nothing. Gaddafi was killed in October 2011. With him died the most forceful voice for rapid African integration. But his death also revealed an uncomfortable truth. The AU's biggest benefactor had been a dictator whom many Africans despised. What did that say about the organization? There's a question the AU has never fully answered. Could it have prevented the Rwandan genocide? The genocide happened in 1994, 8 years before the AU existed. The OAU did nothing, claimed non-interference, respected sovereignty, watched as 800,000 people died in 100 days. The AU was created in part because of Rwanda. Its constitutive act includes Article 4H, the right of the Union to intervene in a member state pursuant to a decision of the Assembly in respect of grave circumstances, namely war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. This was revolutionary. The AU could override sovereignty to stop mass atrocities. But here's what's rarely discussed. Rwanda itself became skeptical of the AU. After the genocide, Rwanda rebuilt under Paul Kagame's leadership. Kagame believed African institutions had failed his people. He developed a philosophy, self-reliance above all. Rwanda would depend on no one. When the AU called for solidarity, Rwanda participated but kept its distance. When AU peacekeeping missions faltered, Rwanda often deployed its own forces instead. Acting unilaterally, the country that inspired the AU's intervention principle became one of its most independent members. The irony is profound. The African Union has 4 official languages: English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. Notice what's missing: African languages, Swahili, spoken by over 100 million people across East Africa, isn't an official AU language. Hausa, spoken by 70 million in West Africa, isn't official. Amharic, spoken in Ethiopia, the AU's headquarters, isn't official. This reflects a deeper truth. The AU is built on colonial foundations. Its borders are colonial. Its official languages are colonial. Even its vision of statehood, modern nation states with presidents and parliaments, is colonial. There's a hidden tension in Pan-Africanism. It seeks to unite Africa against colonialism while using structures and concepts inherited from colonialism. Some African intellectuals argue that true African unity requires decolonizing African minds, returning to indigenous systems of governance, economics, and social organization. But the AU doesn't seriously engage with this. It operates within the post-colonial framework, trying to make it work better rather than replace it entirely. This philosophical contradiction is rarely acknowledged in official AU discourse. Africa still has kingdoms. Morocco is a monarchy. Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, is ruled by King Mswati III. Lesotho has a king. Traditional kingdoms exist within nations like Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, and South Africa. The AU doesn't know what to do with them. The organization is built around modern nation states, but millions of Africans still identify first with their ethnic group or traditional kingdom, not their country. In some places, traditional leaders wield more legitimacy than elected officials. They mediate disputes, maintain customs, and command loyalty, yet they have no formal role in the AU system. This creates a disconnect. The AU claims to represent African peoples, but it only engages with one form of authority, the modern state. Traditional authorities, which have existed for centuries, are invisible in the continental vision. A truly representative African Union would need to reconcile modern and traditional governance, but this conversation rarely happens. Despite its limitations, the African Union has deployed peacekeepers to some of Africa's worst conflicts. Between 2002 and today, the AU has deployed missions to Burundi, AMIB, helping transition from civil war to peace. Sudan, Darfur, AMIS, attempting to protect civilians, later transitioned to UN-AU hybrid mission. Somalia, AMISOM, later ATMIS, fighting Al-Shabaab militants, stabilizing the government. Central African Republic, MISCA, responding to sectarian violence. The Gambia, supporting ECOWAS intervention to enforce election results in 2017. These missions saved lives. AMISOM in Somalia prevented the country from becoming a failed state entirely controlled by extremists. AU peacekeepers in Burundi helped end a brutal civil war. But AU peacekeeping faces chronic problems, funding shortages, missions are underfunded, undersupplied, and sometimes go months without paying soldiers. Capability gaps, a lack of training, equipment, and logistics compared to UN or NATO forces, mandate confusion, unclear rules of engagement, political interference from member states, accountability issues. Some AU peacekeepers have been accused of human rights abuses themselves. The AU's most successful interventions have been when regional organizations like ECOWAS take the lead, with the AU providing political backing. When the AU tries to lead directly, results are mixed. Still, the principle matters. Africans solving African problems. The AU has demonstrated that Africa can deploy its own forces to address its own crises. That's progress compared to the OAU's passivity. One of the AU's most tangible impacts has been on democratic norms. The principle of rejecting unconstitutional changes of government has become established. When coups happen, the AU suspends the country. This doesn't always restore democracy immediately, but it signals that coups are unacceptable.